We were being tortured in ways I cannot describe, Faraj says. Only God knows what we have been through. I swear to you, it was the kind of torture nobody can speak of. Overwhelmed, it is almost too painful for him to recount.
Stories regarding the absolute torture of Palestinian prisoners, many of whom have never been charged with a crime, are becoming more and more obvious, apparent in the news. We're seeing them trickle into the mainstream media, even with CNN putting out new investigative reports on the matter. Here's more.
They play with your emotions, he says. They would show us photos of our relatives' bodies, pictures of our families and children, and say, "Look at your children, we killed them." They would show us pictures of our wives, our sisters, and tell us they had taken them and done this and that to them. Inside, the relatives of those released on Monday frantically call loved ones to share the news. They told him they had killed us all. He still can't believe that we're alive.
So think about that. You have Palestinian prisoners, many of whom have never been charged with a crime. They're just being detained. And as they're imprisoned, you have, I guess, IDF soldiers, whoever's guarding them in the prisons, holding up photos of their family members and talking about all the awful things they did to torture their family members. So the Washington Post reports that on Monday of this week, Abu Salmiya, who is the director of Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital, was one of the 50 Palestinian prisoners released into the Gaza Strip. Abu Salmiya was held under Israel's far-reaching unlawful combatants law, a form of administrative detention that allows Gazans to be held for extended periods without charge and without being classified as prisoners of war. The 2002 law permits a Palestinian to be jailed for up to 45 days without a detention order, up to 75 days without seeing a judge, and up to 6 months without legal counsel. How is this okay? How do we, as a country, look at Israel as this shining beacon, this wonderful democracy in the Middle East, when they're doing this to people, when they're simply detaining people without charge and holding them in these prisons where they're tortured, in some cases for up to 6 months without any legal counsel? And by the way, the prisons had been so unbelievably full, these detention centers, that Shin Bet basically forced Israel to release some of those prisoners. And so when it comes to the director of Al-Shifa Hospital, who was recently released, he was about one of 50 Palestinian prisoners released into the Gaza Strip. He was held without charge, and he had been detained for 7 months. 7 months without charge. CNN has more on his release. Let's take a look.
Some 50 Palestinian detainees were released by Israeli authorities on Monday. Why they were originally detained, we may never know. Among them, the director of Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shifa, released more than 7 months after Israeli forces first raided the hospital and detained him. We were beaten and tortured almost every day. My little finger was broken and I was repeatedly struck across the head, causing me to bleed several times, Dr. Abu Salmiya says. The torture taking place in Israel's prisons is near daily.
Thanks for watching. Our audience has helped build TYT into the media giant it is today. Together, we can accomplish anything. Support our work and join us at tyt.com/team. There have been others who were imprisoned, and they shared details about what they experienced while they were detained, including some of the prisoners getting sexually assaulted in front of other Palestinians as part of their punishment. And now Haaretz is reporting that Israeli ministers have approved a law that would reserve administrative detention for non-Jews. That is literally in their headline. The proposed law says that administrative detention or detention without trial, okay, would only be allowed if the person belongs to a terrorist group. But how do you determine if someone belongs to a terrorist group if you don't adjudicate that through a trial? So can Israeli officials just accuse anyone of being part of a terrorist group and then they immediately get arrested and detained? Yes, that's exactly what they can do. That's exactly what this new law aims to do. Between October 7th and May 1st, 10 Jewish individuals were actually put in administrative detention, which is outrageous. But compare that to the 2,733 Arabs who have been put in administrative detention since October 7th, between October 7th and May 1st. So again, how are you supposed to determine if someone accused of wrongdoing is actually, in fact, guilty of wrongdoing if you don't have a trial? Israeli authorities have detained more than 9,460 Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and Jerusalem since October 7th. And that's according to the Palestinian Prisoners Club. And this is a figure, by the way, that includes those still in prison and those who have been released. And last month, Khalid Mahajna, who is a Palestinian citizen of Israel, was the first lawyer allowed inside one of these prisons. It's the Ste Timan. He told Al Arabi TV that detainees said they also had been sexually assaulted and tortured while detained. According to 972 magazine, most Palestinians at this detention center, at this prison, don't even know why they're being held. At least 35 detainees have died in unknown circumstances since the war began. Many simply call it the death camp. Detainees are also continually blindfolded and tied up with their hands behind their backs, forced to sleep, hunched over on the floor without any bedding. Their iron handcuffs are removed only during a weekly minute-long shower. And by the way, they don't have watches. And so some of them don't even take that minute-long shower because if they go over a minute, well, they get punished. So they just decide not to take the shower because they don't want to risk going a few seconds over that 1 minute of allotted time to take that weekly 1 minute shower. Now, I can't imagine this level of evil. But what's also incredible to me is how much the extremists in the Israeli government brag about what's happening. Because look, there's always that plausible deniability, right? It doesn't matter if it's humanitarian aid groups. It doesn't matter if it's like a third party not having anything to do with Israel or Gaza or Palestinians. There's always denial, right? But it's hard to deny this when a member of Israel's government, Itamar Ben-Gvir, not only takes ownership of the conditions in which these Palestinians are detained and tortured, he wants the conditions to get worse. And he's very open about that. So I'm gonna read you his statements. He put this out on X. The time has come to dismantle the spins and answer the flood of briefings and false accusations by the Shin Bet and its spokespersons in the media. Since I assumed the position of Minister of National Security, one of the highest goals I have set for myself is to worsen the conditions of the terrorists in the prisons and to reduce their rights to the minimum required by law. He's calling them terrorists. Most of them haven't even been charged with anything. They haven't stood trial. They haven't received legal counsel. He's just calling them terrorists because, hey, Palestinian and terrorist is synonymous, right? Same thing. By the way, he's not done yet. There's more. Everything published about the abominable conditions of these vile murderers in prison was true. They ruled the prisons without question and did whatever they pleased. I don't know how that makes any sense. How are they doing whatever they please when they're not even allowed to take daily showers? I mean, when they're handcuffed 100% of the time, when they're not allowed to lay down to sleep, when some of them are allegedly being sexually assaulted by prison guards as a form of punishment in front of other Palestinian detainees. He complained that the Shin Bet had been trying to prevent him from making the prison conditions more horrific. However, after the outbreak of the war, he says, I was able to finally carry out the long-awaited reform. The conditions of the terrorists in the prison were reduced to a minimum. We stopped the final deposits, canceled the canteens for the terrorists, removed the electrical devices from the cells, stopped the terrorists' promenade, dramatically reduced the terrorists' stay in the showers, canceled the speaker's status, and stopped the indulgent food menu that was converted into a minimum menu. And if you're wondering, oh, what does that minimum menu entail? They get a little bit of lebni. Okay, it's like a kind of like a thick yogurt type substance. It's delicious. I love it, lebni. But they get lebni and maybe a tomato, maybe a cucumber, and that's it for an entire day. He went on to give his barbaric idea for how to deal with overcrowded prisoners or prisons. Remember, Shin Bet had forced Israel to release some of the prisoners who hadn't been charged with anything because these prisons were so overcrowded. And so here's what Ben-Gvir has to say about that. I've already proposed a much simpler solution of enacting the death penalty for terrorists, which would solve the overcrowding issue, legislation to which the Shin Bet is also vehemently opposed. Yeah, because you can't just point to people and say they're terrorists without, a trial, without charging them and then having them go through a trial. And I want to show you exactly what Ben-Gvir is justifying.
Mahmoud Ali Baida says he was detained for more than 8 months. Look at my legs, he says. They wouldn't give us anything to treat our rashes. Many have spoken of the little food and water they received while in detention. Others say they were denied medication, including insulin for diabetes. For a month and a half, I was blindfolded, handcuffed, and forced to kneel, Wa'il Mansour says, highlighting the deep scars left on his wrists.
The whole world is watching this. Like, I get that the US government will always provide cover for anything Israel has to do or wants to do. But the rest of the world is watching this. And if anyone is under the impression that the current Israeli government is effectively rooting out terrorism and terrorists against them, man, they couldn't be more wrong. This is the kind of behavior and the kind of treatment toward innocent people that breeds extremism and breeds terrorism. People like Ben-Gvir do not have Israel's best interests in mind. And he's an evil, evil person. To watch these people who have never been charged with a crime, who have never stood trial, get tortured the way they've been tortured, and think that the torture isn't enough is just absolutely sick. And we don't have a leader here in the United States who is really willing to fight against this and to maybe talk some sense into Israel's government, or maybe even, use the leverage the United States has in regard to the weaponry that we send them in order to rein in some of Israel's behavior. But no one's even paying attention to what's happening in Israel and Gaza right now. Too much going on with our own unstable, chaotic political system. And part of that chaos is due to the fact that we have a president who is experiencing severe cognitive decline and is running for re-election.